Have you ever imagined taking the first step in a place never before explored by humans? In 1969, the Apollo 11 mission turned that dream into reality, taking mankind to the moon. However, this journey was filled with challenges and uncertainties. Today, we revisit this historic mission, which is not just about science, but also about courage, fear, and risk. A small step that represented a giant leap for humanity. To fully grasp the significance of Apollo 11, we need to go back a few decades amidst the rising tensions of the Cold War. It was a time when the world was divided into two major blocks. On one side, the United States and its capitalist allies, and on the other, the Soviet Union and the Communist bloc. This rivalry was evident in many aspects of political and military life, but it also extended into outer space. The Soviet Union took an early lead in the space race with some remarkable milestones. In 1957, Sputnik became the first satellite to orbit the Earth, and in 1961, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space. These achievements placed the United States in a challenging position. There was a growing perception that space supremacy was closely tied to military and technological power, and the U.S. needed to respond in kind. It was in this context that, on May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy delivered a bold speech that would change the course of history. He announced that the United States would commit to landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. This declaration seemed almost impossible at the time. NASA, which had been established only a few years earlier, in 1958, was just beginning to understand the challenges of sending humans into space, let alone sending them to the moon. The technical challenge of Apollo 11 was unimaginable. At that time, computers were the size of entire rooms, with a mere fraction of the computing power of the smartphones we carry today. The idea of building a rocket capable of transporting humans nearly 400,000 kilometers to the moon was something that pushed the boundaries of available technology. NASA had to design new systems, develop lighter and stronger materials, and, above all, ensure the safety of the crew. There was also a tremendous human risk involved. In 1967, just 2 years before Apollo 11, NASA faced a devastating tragedy. During a routine test on the launch pad, the Apollo 1 capsule caught fire, killing all 3 astronauts on board: Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. This incident dealt a harsh blow to the American space program. The public began to question whether it was worth risking human lives in the name of space exploration. However, the engineers learned from the accident, redesigning the spacecraft's safety systems to ensure that such an event wouldn't happen again on Apollo 11. Despite the adversities, NASA pressed on, conducting a series of successful missions that paved the way for Apollo 11. Finally, on July 16, 1969, the gigantic Saturn V rocket, standing over 110 meters tall, launched from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. On that day, millions of people around the world watched the liftoff, holding their breath. It was a moment filled with pure anticipation and hope. Inside the spacecraft, 3 men were ready to make history: Neil Armstrong, the mission commander and lunar module pilot; Edwin Buzz Aldrin, lunar module pilot; and Michael Collins, command module pilot, whose task was to orbit the moon while Armstrong and Aldrin descended to its surface. The journey to the moon took about 4 days. During this time, the 3 astronauts experienced zero gravity in the vastness of space. Michael Collins, who later wrote about the experience, described the feeling of solitude and the realization of how small Earth looked from the distance they had traveled. "You realize how fragile we are," Collins commented in several interviews. The landing was one of the most nerve-wracking moments of the entire mission. After days of travel, on July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the lunar module, affectionately named Eagle, and began their descent toward the moon's surface. But not everything went according to plan. As they neared the moon, the module's computer began to overload with data triggering a series of alarms that nearly forced NASA to abort the landing. On top of that, the pre-selected landing site turned out to be too rough, with large rocks and craters that could have wrecked the module on impact. Armstrong, displaying incredible skill, took manual control of the Eagle and, guided only by his sight, found a relatively flat area for the landing. The seconds before touchdown were electrifying. The lunar module's fuel was running dangerously low, and any further delay would have required them to abort the mission. But with just seconds of fuel remaining, Armstrong finally touched down and transmitted the famous message. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." After several hours preparing their suits and equipment, Neil Armstrong descended the ladder of the lunar module and made history by becoming the first human to set foot on another celestial body. His words, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," resonated around the world. It was a moment of triumph, not just for the United States, but for all of humanity. Shortly after, Buzz Aldrin also stepped onto the surface, describing the landscape as magnificent desolation. The two astronauts spent about 2.5 hours walking on the moon, collecting rock samples, taking photographs, and conducting experiments. They also planted the American flag on the surface and left a plaque that read, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon." July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind. After spending 21 hours on the moon, it was time to return to Earth. Armstrong and Aldrin lifted off from the lunar module and rendezvoused with Collins, who was waiting for them in the command module, Columbia. The trip back to Earth was smooth, but the risks remained substantial. Upon re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, the capsule could overheat and burn up. Fortunately, the heat shield functioned perfectly, and on July 24, 1969, the Columbia capsule landed safely in the Pacific Ocean. Apollo 11 was not just a scientific and technological achievement, it transformed how humanity perceives its place in the universe. When we look at the photographs taken by the astronauts, especially the iconic Earthrise, where Earth appears as a small blue and white sphere floating in the void, we begin to grasp the fragility and preciousness of our planet. Furthermore, Apollo 11 served as a powerful reminder that when we come together and work in unison, we can achieve extraordinary feats. Since then, numerous other space missions have taken place, and space exploration remains one of humanity's greatest aspirations. Today, we are closer to sending humans to Mars, and who knows what the future holds. The journey of Apollo 11 is one of the most inspiring stories in modern history. It reminds us that, even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges, human determination and spirit can take us to places once unimaginable. If you enjoyed this incredible trip back in time, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more content like this. And if you want to keep exploring the universe and its mysteries, there's an amazing video popping up on your screen right now. Go ahead and check it out, and see you next time.